Welcome to this part two of the series of videos that I'm posting on a service provided by DH India Association, which is forecasting the capacity and predicting patient load for certain COVID hospitals, especially in underserved areas. My name is Dr. Pramod David Jacob. I am the CEO of DH India Association. These are my qualifications. I had already covered that in the first part, but for those who are probably seeing this part for the first time, here are my qualifications. In the first part, I had covered about the foundation on a program called the Integrated Disease Surveillance Program and the publish COVID positives and mortality, and spoken, about how believable they are. In part two, which is this part, I will be actually getting into the modeling, which actually helps predict and forecast capacity for hospitals. And in this part, we are covering a real case study of the forecasting and prediction done for a district COVID hospital in a district called Jalna in Maharashtra. What is the type of modeling we used? Firstly, the modeling assists hospitals in predicting the patient load from 1 day to 4 weeks in advance, and whether the capacity can handle that patient load or whether they have to make alternative arrangements in the capacity by having secondary units opened up or changing the rules of admission and discharge so that they can handle, increase in case there is an increased need for capacity or increased flooding of patients coming for admissions. The capacity planning provides estimates of new admissions, total admissions, ICU admissions, and ventilator needs, all the way up to 4 weeks in advance. So all the way up to 4 weeks in ahead. And the modeling type or modeling paradigm we use is something called the SIR model, which stands for Susceptible, Infected, and Recovered Paradigm. It's a fairly well-known paradigm in the epidemiology world, and it is one of those which is used for forecasting. So this is what the sort of how it looks like when we do the forecasting. There is a certain amount of information that we put in here, right? When you fill in this sort of information and then you kind of run the algorithm and the output looks like this. The upper output here is actually showing you the new admits over time, new admissions per day. While this is, which is the actual graph of interest for us, is showing you how many admitted patients per day and also among them how many in the ICU, and if you have on ventilators, how many on ventilators. We run the logarithm that automatically calculates and takes off those patients who are recovered or recovering and therefore discharged from the hospital, so that it's not a sort of a linear progression, but it actually does this adjustment for the discharges and those who have recovered. There is some data that we need from each hospital that we are providing the service for, has a one-time data. For example, the catchment population. Now, if you have a designated COVID hospital for a district, that means the catchment population for running this model would be the population of that district, right? That is what we meant by catchment. Now, share of catchment population means if you are one of two hospitals, which are the designated COVID hospitals in that district, and in case you have 100 beds in your hospital and the other hospital has 50 beds, that means your share of the catchment population is 2/3, right? Which is about 66.7%. So that's what we meant by share of the catchment population. What is the date of the first admitted or hospitalized patient? That is if it is known. If you do know in the present epidemic or pandemic or present event, what was the date that the first patient with this particular disease was hospitalized, that does help in calculating the actual forecasting. Infectious days is the number of days that this given disease in which a patient who is infected with it can infect others, right? So that is what we mean by infectious days. In the case of COVID, it is about 10 days. It may change, but very rarely it does. We normally have a thumb rule for saying that a COVID patient, once they get infectious, can infect for 10 days, infect another person for 10 days. That's what is meant by infectious days. The data that we need on a regular basis from that hospital, meaning every 2 or 3 days, so that as the disease progresses and the spread progresses and the curve starts getting more steep, we are able to predict the flow of patient load, because generally that patient load will start getting higher, right, as the disease starts spreading, quickly spreading, especially in highly infectious diseases like COVID. So what we do ask for on a regular basis is number of patients hospitalized on that day, the date of the first hospitalized patient. If they were not known, if you did not know the date of the first hospitalized patient, do you know the present doubling time in your catchment area? What we mean by doubling time is the amount of time it takes for that disease to spread from X, your population right now, to 2X, right? When does it become, if it is 10 now, when does it become that there are 20 positive cases in your catchment area? That is meant by doubling time. Then if there is a social distancing or a lockdown, what was the first date that social distancing came into effect? Then the next thing is, in case there is social distancing, what is the percentage of social distancing? There is a thumb rule we follow for this. It has been found through trial and error and trying different model runs, that in case it is a red zone, that you normally put a percentage of social distancing as 50%. If it is an orange zone, it becomes 40%. And then if it is a green zone, between almost 10 to 15%, or maybe even 0%. Containment zone, we find about 60% is what we'll put as a percentage. Then the percentage of active positive patients who are hospitalized. The rule across most of the country, except for in those cities which are overrun by the pandemic right now, the rule is that if in case you find a positive patient, that patient is supposed to be admitted to a designated COVID hospital, whether they are symptomatic or not. And in fact, that's how it started in Jalna also. The district that I'm talking about is called Jalna, and that's how it started there also. So then what is the percentage active positive patients who are hospitalized? Is generally 100% in such circumstances. Out of them, how many were in ICU? And therefore, what is the percentage of patients who are active or positive in ICU? That is what we have to put. And then also out of that, how many are ventilated, right? So again, what percentage of the patients who are positive in your catchment area are hospitalized? That is what it puts. Those are sort of the data that we put in. Again, more data that's needed on a regular basis. Days that this disease is infectious for someone infected. Okay, what this means is that basically we generally take it as 10 days, which is what I had mentioned in the one-time data collection. But in case there is a variation which can happen with certain viruses getting or mutating, or in certain epidemics or in pandemics, that's why we probably have to take it more than just one time. In case we find that it mutates and therefore the infectious diseases or infectious state of a person can prolong or get longer, we have to make that adjustment. Average hospital length of stay in days. So what this means is, how many days on an average does a person who's admitted with positive, whether symptomatic or asymptomatic, have to stay in the hospital? There is a general thumb rule which varies from hospital to hospital. Some hospitals say 7 days, some hospitals say 10 days, right? Similarly, the average number of days that a patient who goes into the ICU spends in the ICU. Is it 4 days? Is it 7 days? Is it 10 days? So that is what we put in as for that figure. And then we generally ask the hospital administration how many days we would like to project it. We can project it up to 30 days in advance, right? The forecasting can be done up to 30 days in advance. Then we, of course, put in the current date because that is a requirement to sort of know what is the present situation. And these are the admitted patients today. Now, this logarithm scale option, if you do not select this option, what happens is you basically have a calculation of total positive patients, and those recovered are not minus from that. But if you put this option, then what it does do is that it takes the recovered out of the sort of graph, and therefore you have the graph of the actual patients who are admitted right now. So that's what that logarithm scale option does. We are going to be looking at a district hospital in a district called Jalna in the interior of Maharashtra. And it is a district that is also got a town called Jalna, which is east of the city of Aurangabad. The population is around 24 lakhs or 2.4 million. The designated COVID hospital, which is part of the government hospital, district government hospital complex in that city or town of Jalna, and it has got it is a dedicated separate building for this COVID hospital. It has 120 beds totally, out of which non-ICU beds are 80 with oxygen supply for all of those 80. And the ICU beds are 40 in number. Out of those 40 beds, they have 35 with ventilators. They do have potential for additional capacity because in case you get overrun, this 120 gets overrun, you could probably open up other wards in the hospital complex, which could be converted to COVID wards. It was started around April 25th, 2020, that is April 25th. And the protocol when it started was that all COVID positive patients had to be admitted in this hospital. So that was the admitting rule. And the discharging rule was that you had to carry out COVID tests till they became negative. And once they became negative, you keep them for another 4 or 5 days, assuming they're asymptomatic by then, and then only discharge them and they are asked to home quarantine themselves for another 1 week. How does the story of forecasting for Jalna go? And I'm talking of the first few modeling runs that we did. Now, like I mentioned, we do this on a application or software that is provided by Pennsylvania, University of Pennsylvania, and it is based on the SIR model. So the details of the hospital, as I said, capacity of the hospital is 120, okay, out of which 40 are ICU beds. We did the first modeling run or first forecasting on May 16th. Okay, so what you do when you do a particular run or when you do a forecasting is you validate whether that forecasting is accurate by comparing past data from the hospital with past data that this modeling graph shows. What I mean is that if I carry out a run today, or if I do a run now, it will give me the predictions up to 30 days in advance, but it also shows me what has happened in the last 10 to 15 days. I think it is 2 weeks, last 2 weeks. Therefore, if I have actual data from the hospital, retrospective data of few dates in this past 2 weeks, I can compare that with this particular modeling run and see if the past data reconciles with what the modeling run is showing or what the graph shows. So that is how I get how I can get reliability or confidence that this particular graph is actually accurate, right? So when we did that first modeling run on May 16 or the first forecasting, we found that the data in the graph did reconcile with data from the hospital on May 7th, where from the hospital we found that there were 8 patients. The graph also showed 8 patients. On May 11th, where they had 11 patients. On May 14th, where they had 15 patients. And remember, I have done this on May 16th. Has to show you proof of the fact I was getting real data from the field. Please look at this WhatsApp message that I posted, which is from the administrator, one of the administrators in that hospital, who used to provide me regular, every 2 or 3 days would provide me, or even almost on a daily basis, would provide me the status of their admitted patients, discharged patients, in patients in ICU and so on. Now, seeing that this past data did match, we had some confidence in the first run. And what it showed was that it predicted that the capacity of 120 beds would be crossed around June 14th. Remember, we did this in May 16th, and it's according to its projection, it showed that this capacity would be crossed by June 14th. There were no ICU admissions, and there were no ICU admissions till that date. So therefore, we could not project any ICU bed usage, because it's only after the ICU beds start getting 1 or 2 patients or a few patients that we can project the requirements of the ICU beds also. What it is showing you is, we've done this run on May 16th, and when we did it, I have already told you that the past data did compare with some of this data that is out here. And what it showed was that on this date of June 14th, we would be crossing 120 beds. I think it reaches 124 on June 14th. And therefore, they would have crossed the capacity by then, right? So a heads up to the administration that today is May 16th. You have to be aware that by June 14th, you're likely to cross your capacity. You have to either open up other units, or you have to make some changes in your admission or discharge criteria, right? That's what it was indicating. Now, moving on to what did we do in the next run? We got better at this. With practice, you get better at modeling and at carrying out forecasting. So with the data that I then received on May 19th, which is what I'm showing you there, I had received this data, total 41, admitted 34. No ICU, no ventilator. So then we did the modeling run, or we did the forecasting on the data that we received on this day, which was May 19th. And it matched on these particular dates, the past data. On April 19th, there were 2 patients. So did the graph show 2 patients. On May 2nd, there were 8 patients. So did the graph show 8 patients. And then on May 17 also, it matched. Current hospitalized patients on that day was 34. Now, as per this projection, or as this prediction was done on this run, it predicted that they would cross 120 bed capacity by June 4th. Remember, the last time we did the first run, it was June 14th. Now it's showing June 4th, indicating that there is an acceleration in the spread of the disease, probably, right? And therefore, that's why it became June 4th now. There were no ICU admissions, and the projection, therefore, cannot show you ICU projections until we have some patients admitted in the ICU. Now, the amazing thing about this particular run, or this particular projection we did, was it was spot on from 19th of May till May 29th. Day by day, it actually predicted almost on a day-by-day basis the correct numbers who would be hospitalized, the correct numbers who would be coming in as new admissions. And that really gave us even more confidence that maybe, we are doing this correctly. And whenever I was giving these projections back, or this graph back to the authorities and to the administrators, they started looking at it and taking it quite seriously. So I will show you the graph, the associated graph for this particular May 19th one, and tell you where all, it went right? So we started right. We start here, okay, which is basically on the 20th, I did the run for the 19th, which means that it showed that 41 admissions, totally 34 admissions were there. But then it also showed you what was going to happen on future dates, right? And what we did is, when these future dates arrived, right? For example, when it came to the 25th of May, we got these figures from the hospital. And we looked and saw that the run carried out on 19th of May exactly predicted that on this particular day, there will be 56 admitted, which it did. Even if it is 57 or 58, or even +2, -2 is pretty good, but this was almost spot on. On the 29th of May, the one that we did on 19th, the projection that we did on 19th came absolutely correct again, because it showed that there would be 87 patients, and it was 87 patients. It was only around 30th or 31st of May that these projections did not really get to what real the field data showed, and there's a reason for that, which I will explain. So this, if they had kept going at this rate and they had the same policies of admission and discharge, by June 4th, their hospital would have been filled, and therefore any patients who were coming after June 4th would not have a place in that hospital. So this was an issue that was being realized by the management. And like I said, it was pretty amazing that the run we did on May 19th was completely, almost to the spot accurate till about May 29th, 30th. Now, this is to show you proof that, you know, what we did on May 19th actually came true even on May 25th, because these are the actual figures and they were the same as what it was in the May 19th graph. And this also was pretty accurate. And here, in fact, because a slight acceleration later, instead of June 4th, they told us that June 3rd is when you are going to now run out of capacity, meaning the spread of the disease probably is a little faster. But again, remember, the May 19th told us June 4th. This is telling us June 3rd, which we, and this run we did on 25th. Yeah, right. Here you go. 25th it was done on, right? Now, moving on. Then on May 31st, we got data from the field, and what we realized was, now there is some difference. There is something happening, right? Because we noticed that the number of patients being discharged in a day was definitely starting to increase. Okay. And also, you know, therefore we found that the data for May 31st was not matching with that May 19th or even the May 25th run. So what we had to do is, we therefore had to take this data and do a new run, right? And then see, okay, now what is it telling us? Is it that the community spread has slowed down? Is it that there's some change in policy? That's another matter. But the point is, if we take this data, when are they going to run out of capacity? Remember, it was June 4th on May 19th, and then the run we did on May 25th told us it was June 3rd. But as per the June 31st run, or the June 31st forecasting, it was only now going to cross on June 6th. Okay, so it did show that there is some little difference happening, because normally you would expect the acceleration to go up. It was definitely not peaking, the curve had not yet peaked, and therefore we felt there was something that was different. Sure enough, we did actually, so this is the 31st projection. And again, past data has matched. Let me see if the past data have matched here, like the dates are given. And May 26th, it showed us 56, and this is also showing us 56. This is the current. May 31st was 79 admitted, and that's what we put into the run that we did on the 31st. We did this on 31st, therefore it does show, you know, the 31st, which is 79. But the past figure also, you know, the past, it did show that in 56 on 26th was accurate, even by the graph and by what actual data we got. It is going to run out of capacity on June 6th. Now, all this while, I had been in touch with my administrator, who has been very diligent in sending data almost, if not on a daily, at least on every 2 or 3 days. They would send the data, you know, on a regular basis, which I've been showing you. I've been showing you the WhatsApp cutouts for that, right? And they did take it seriously, right? Because they started realizing, okay, especially as we got to May 31st and 30th, 31st, that in a few days, maybe in a week's time, they will overrun if they do not take, or even less than a week, if they do not take some action. And they did take action. And we like to think that maybe, you know, we did play a role in that we did help them get ready and prepared and be in a situation where they could handle the increasing load that was otherwise coming. So around 29th of May, they realized that within a week or less than a week, they would be running out of capacity. They gave us data on June 6th, and we were surprised that they had not run out of capacity. Remember, on 31st, we had suspected there were some changes. They had not told us what the changes in the policy were. But on June 6th, which was a date that even the latest run of 31st showed they were going to run out of capacity, they had not. In fact, they had only 104 hospitalized. They should have been about 129 hospitalized, right? This was because there was a change in admission and discharge protocols from around May 29th, when they started taking these graphs or these runs very seriously, these forecasting seriously, right? And therefore, they did make a change in their protocols, both for admission and for discharge. And I probably can say with some confidence that this particular forecasting we did, or this particular runs that we did, or modeling runs we did help them make an educated guesstimate and therefore ramp up in time to handle the load so that they were not going to run out of beds for patients who really needed beds, all right, for those who are moderate or severely sick. So what are the changes they carried out? And here again is a WhatsApp proof of the changes they did. For admission, firstly, they started shifting asymptomatic and mildly symptomatic COVID positive patients to rural hospitals and primary health centers, which they had already sort of got organized from the 29th of May, and started making sure that these asymptomatic and mildly symptomatic patients were shifted over to those rural and primary health centers, thereby making beds in the main hospital, 120 beds, you remember, in the main hospital, available for really moderate to severely sick patients. That was the first step they did. The second step, where again I'm showing you the sort of WhatsApp message which proves it, was for discharge. Now they also changed their rules. Instead of retesting and testing and retesting till a patient became COVID negative, what they did do now was the discharge was done on the 10th day from admission of a COVID positive patient if they were stable and asymptomatic for 5 days. Remember, most of them did not even have symptoms. Even if they did have symptoms, what they did do was, instead of retesting and using COVID testing and retesting, what they did do is 10 days after admission, if this patient was asymptomatic in the last 5 days and stable, then they were discharging the patient. That's why you see an increase in the discharge from May 31st on to June 6th and 8th and all, right? So we felt pretty good about this because it is a wonderful case study, and it's a wonderful case study not only in the fact of the modeling and the services that DH India is providing, but by the fact that the administration not only took heed of our predictions, but actually took steps to that effect. And I am going to follow this with interaction with the administrator of that hospital, one of the administrators of that hospital. His name is Dr. Christopher Moses, where I'm going to talk about, about the experience that they had with this, the setting up of their hospital, and about how this forecasting helped them, and how did it help them take a decision about changing their protocols, and thereby being able to handle the increasing load that they are getting nowadays. And with that, I will now move to the last slide of this, which is basically a summary of what we have talked about so far. Here, we first started with explaining how the SIR modeling, right? Susceptibility, infected and recovered modeling works, or give you an idea about how it works. We talked about the data that we collect at one time. Then what is the data that we collect on a regular basis? And then we showed you an example of the model. I showed you the output. We went on to then actually doing and telling you the actual runs we carried out. Firstly, the first few runs, like May 16th and May 19th, and also how the May 19th run really proved to be pretty accurate all the way up to May 30th, actually. I say May 29th, but actually till May 30th. Then we went on to look at why is it on May 31st there was a change, and we realized they had changed their protocols, which was confirmed later by WhatsApp message we got from them. And this is a very wonderful example of how digital health, helps even rural hospitals or, remote hospitals and rural hospitals. In fact, it is more important for them so that they can really, step up to the plate and get ready in time. And In the next video, in fact, after this slide, I will be actually showing you the meeting that I had with Dr. Christopher Moses, who is the co-administrator of that hospital there. And then I'm speaking to him, and he's relating about, he's talking of how they firstly set up and got ready and how these predictions have helped them. Thank you, Dr. Moses, for having agreed to have this interaction. I appreciate it in spite of your busy schedule, for having taken a few minutes for us to go over a few questions that I would like to ask you regarding your experience about, being, if I'm not mistaken, you are the administrator of the COVID hospital at Jalna district. Am I right in saying that?
Administration is handled by the government administration.
Okay.
I'm an outside administrative supporter of the COVID hospital at Jalna. Let's put it that way.
Very good.
Yeah.
So you're very knowledgeable about what is happening there, and the whole story probably from when you all set it up. Would you like to give me a brief explanation of how the Jalna district set up their COVID hospital, and roughly when was it that they started it? And please go ahead and explain how that whole came about.
Somewhere around mid-March, when we realized that COVID was not going to leave in a hurry,
right,
and every district was supposed to have facilities for COVID, the Indian Medical Association of Jalna got together and met the collector and the government officials and told them that we would like to centralize the COVID care facility as far as possible in the government institution campus. They had a building which was unused for about 10 years with all the fixtures missing, stolen away.
Okay.
But the size was good, and we calculated and we felt that we could fit in about 120 beds there, including a 40-bedded ICU.
Right.
So, 80 general beds plus 40 beds of the ICU.
Mm-hmm.
But there was nothing inside the building except for the skeleton.
Okay.
So it started with cleaning up that place, and from there, 220 bedded hospital, including OPD facilities, admitting facilities, lab, X-ray, 40-bed ICU, we managed to complete within 27 days.
Sorry, you said what was the total beds thing that came up?
120.
120, out of which 40 beds were ICU. Right.
Out of that, 40 were ICU beds.
Okay.
40.
And how many ventilators do you all have?
Then I'll come to that.
Okay.
Basically, what we did was, Jalna has a very large steel industry.
Okay.
We literally decide the steel rates for the rest of the country.
Okay.
by production here.
Right.
So we approached them, and through their CSR, we managed to get 32 ventilators for the ICU,
Okay.
plus all the oxygen piping, oxygen bank, everything was done through the CSR. Then
All
they manufactured from their own steel ICU cots, ordinary cots, mattresses were donated by somebody else. So a lot of equipment inside came through CSR actually. Government had to spend very little on it.
I see.
Government then decided that they would put all that money into PPEs and the medications and medicines required and additional staff that they had to recruit. That's what
Okay.
government
Okay.
did.
Okay. So that's
Of
how
course,
they were
not
able
to,
to.
not to,
Please go ahead.
not to say biggest help in this was by our state health minister, Mr. Rajesh Tope, who basically happens to be from Jalna. So
Very interesting.
state health minister sitting in state level definitely helps a lot.
Thank you.
Because
Correct. So
for many other places got ventilators and all, he managed to get the ventilators to Jalna and things like that.
okay. So that way y'all were therefore more or less set up and ready before the sort
By
of.
mid-April, we were fully ready for this.
Okay.
And I mean, we used to look at it and say, my God, we have created such a huge facility and we have no patients.
I see.
Because till end of April, we had
Right.
only 2 patients, only
Okay.
2 positives.
Okay. But
Our problem started only in May after that.
right. But then from there, I think it has been growing. The numbers have been growing.
Then
Right?
it has climbed up. Now today we are from 1st of May to today is 15th of June, 1.5 months. From 2 we have climbed to 255
Oh, wow. Okay.
total positives.
Okay.
In addition to government facility, we also put up 25 beds in 2 private hospitals for as dedicated Corona health centers, DCHCs.
And when
There are
was that
separate.
done? When was that done?
That was also, I mean, 25 beds we were told to keep ready at the same time, just in case we had a flooding of patients. Plus,
Okay.
there are patients who still don't want to go to government facility, who
Okay.
have Mediclaim and things like that, and who are willing to pay for their care.
Okay.
But they want more personalized attention and things like that.
Okay.
Plus, there was a worry that if medical fraternity became infected,
Right.
where would they go?
Okay.
So, on that basis, for stage 1 and stage 2 disease, that means mild to moderate disease, we put up 2 DCHCs in private hospitals. One of them was my own institution, Jalna Mission Hospital.
Okay.
The main requirement for DCHC is you have to have a totally separate facility.
Okay.
That means you cannot have an entrance which is shared by others, exit which is shared by others. Ambulance should be parked there and it should be sanitized after it comes in, etc., etc., etc. Most of the modern hospitals do not have this because they have only one common entrance at the front.
Okay. So,
Even if they have a lift, they have one lift. If they give it for COVID patients, what will they do for the other patients?
okay.
So those kind of problems come.
Okay.
So for me, it was a much easier probability because I had a ward which was not being used. So I had to just, so I didn't need a lift for it.
Right.
And
So this is in
I
your,
could
in
get a
your,
vehicle to
this,
come and park there. Yeah.
this is in your mission hospital.
So
okay.
that is in the Mission Hospital campus.
Okay.
I had to just complete the oxygenation and things like that.
Okay. So actually you answered
Yeah.
my next few questions, which was basically asking you about the, the PPE supply and the oxygen and the medication supply.
Yeah.
How do you manage your oxygen resupply? You're filling up your tanks and all. Is there an
Yeah.
issue? Do you have to go out of town or is it?
There is, see, because of such a huge steel industry in Jalna, actually
Okay.
industrial oxygen, what they need is 100%. Our medical oxygen is only 96%.
Okay. All right.
So when one of the young entrepreneurs was planning to put up an industrial oxygen plant in Jalna, I happened to be in a bank and he was asking for loan. So I
Okay.
told the manager, don't give him loan unless he puts the filter.
Okay. Okay. So in
And
that way,
this was 20 years ago.
I see.
20 years ago he has put.
I see.
He is capable of supplying not only to Jalna, but the neighboring district of Aurangabad also. His capacity is about 30,000 jumbo cylinders a day.
I see. I see. So that means you
So
seem to have
it's
been,
not an issue.
yeah, you seem to have been pretty well prepared and also looked into the entire supply chain, even during lockdown, because that seems to have been a real limiting factor other hospitals probably have faced.
Yeah.
But I think Jalna was very well prepared. And firstly, congratulations to the authorities and
Thank
to
you.
yourselves
Thank you.
for having done such a wonderful job. of getting
Our main problem was PPs.
PPEs. Okay. And
PPs in private setups, because government, just like what happened in US,
right.
where federal government bought off all the PPs and there was nothing for common man in the market.
Okay.
Same thing happened in India also.
Okay.
So we didn't have PPs initially. So we shoved all our staff into raincoats.
I'm sorry, when you're saying we,
And
you mean the private hospitals and your mission hospitals?
Mission hospital.
Okay.
We had to put them into raincoats and gumboots and things like that, which became horrendously hot in the weather that we have.
Okay.
And everybody would be dehydrated at the end of 2 hours.
Right.
Now with PPEs and change of air conditioning systems in labor rooms and things like that, I have set aside a separate labor room even for patients who are not tested or who have got travel industry history, etc., etc. So I've got 2 labor rooms functioning now.
So can you please tell me what was the firstly, the air conditioning was very interesting to hear. You mean you have an air conditioned setup? Is it a negative pressure sort of a setup, or is it?
No. This is for the labor room I'm talking about.
All right. So in the labor room, you just have a normal window AC?
Normal air conditioner, window, wall mounted.
Okay.
Split unit.
Okay.
Because
that, I guess the window AC allows you to.
Really speaking. Not really for the patient also. It's for the poor nurse or the doctor who is inside the PPE.
Got it. Okay.
More than anything.
And I guess because it's a window AC unit, you can actually allow fresh air circulation, right? Which is, I think, important.
Yes, it recirculates air by itself. So
okay, then
it has an exhaust attached to it.
Right. Now, the other important question I want to ask you is, what were the protocols for admission and discharge, and maybe the related testing when you all started? And was there any change in these protocols as you went on down the line? Can you please explain that?
When we started, every patient who tested positive was admitted.
Okay.
Whether they were asymptomatic or mildly symptomatic, they were all admitted.
Okay.
And we had plenty of bed space. I mean, we had 120 beds and only 2 patients.
Right.
So they were admitted. On 8th day after admission, their repeat swab was taken.
Okay.
If that swab was negative, they were discharged.
Okay.
Then we came to a stage when patient swabs were turning positive even on 8th day.
Okay.
So we said till the swab becomes negative,
right,
we will keep the patient admitted.
Right.
So one patient actually had 7 swabs, and she stayed a total of 42 days.
Okay.
Admitted. She was our first patient actually in Jalna.
Okay.
She had other comorbidities also and things like that. But then she stayed 42 days. But as the things happened after May, a lot of people started migrating back from Bombay and Pune back to Jalna and surrounding villages.
Okay.
So that is when our number started rising by 2nd week of May, 3rd week of May, things like that.
Right.
Once that started rising, we realized that bed space was not enough.
Right.
Or we would run short of bed space very soon.
Right.
So then, looking at other protocols, like Aurangabad had already set it up that 10 days after admission, if patient is fully asymptomatic for minimum of 5 days, you discharge the patient without a second swab.
Okay. Okay.
So because they say beyond 10 days, they are not infected, they just go for home quarantine for another 10 days.
All right. And
so that was one change.
Yeah.
Then second change was patients who were requiring oxygen.
Right.
For them also, we said no second swab if the patient is off oxygen for 72 hours.
72 hours. That is 3 days, right?
3 days. 3 days. Yeah.
Okay. And but
asymptomatic for 5 days or off oxygen for 3 days. So these were the changes, and no second swab.
If I may just clarify, so somebody who was on oxygen And in 72 hours, they may not require oxygen, but if they still had some fever or some sort of sign, a symptom or sign like
Then
that.
he's symptomatic. Then he's still symptomatic.
Correct. So it has to be asymptomatic and off oxygen for 72 hours. Correct?
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. All right.
So
Thank
that
you.
was one thing.
Right. One thing more I would really like a couple of. Sorry, please go ahead.
We have not reached a stage where we are saying asymptomatics can just stay at home. We have not reached that stage, which bigger cities have still reached. Already reached. They are not admitting asymptomatics also now.
But asymptomatics are asymptomatics being admitted into your main COVID hospital?
For some time, they were being admitted in main COVID hospital. When it started getting crowded, then now in the last 2 weeks, we have started off opening up the RHCs, the rural health centers. The district has got 8 RHCs.
Okay.
Each one has got about 30 beds.
Okay.
There are medical officers posted there.
Okay.
So first 3-4 days, if they are positive and they are asymptomatic.
1 minute, just pause just a moment. I'm getting one thing.
All positives are admitted.
All positives are admitted, but if they are asymptomatic, they are kept into these rural health centers, correct?
We are shifting them now slowly to rural hospitals which are close to their own village.
Okay, got it. And only the moderate to severe are being probably admitted into the main COVID hospital.
Moderate to severe are admitted here.
Right.
Other thing is, see, rural hospitals, what they have called CCC, Corona Care Center.
Okay.
They are manned by Ayush doctors.
Okay, I see.
People who are here for COVID hospital as well as for DCHC, you need at least MBBS or MD.
May I ask what is the DCHC full form? What is the
Dedicated Corona Health Center. Dedicated
health, and the other one
Corona
is
Health Center.
Okay, got it.
What we have got in Mission Hospital, Jalna.
Right. While the main hospital is called the designated COVID hospital or something to that effect, right?
The designated COVID hospital.
Okay. So now, if I may ask you, you must have been aware that we have been working together, trying to work out this forecasting and the prediction modeling that we had, and seeing whether we could help you all in actually getting a judgment call and giving you a forewarning about the capacity and patient load that might come a few weeks from now. From 1 day to 4 weeks was the prediction.
Yeah.
So what did you think? Did you think that helped you all? Did it help you all in getting your strategy right and ramping up when needed? Please give your feedback.
Yeah, basically the maps and all what you were sending on the figure forecasting which you were sending.
Right.
This is what I was to share with the person who's looking after the government dedicated COVID health hospital.
Okay.
COVID hospital, as well as with the person who has been made in charge of the entire district's COVID setup. There's a person who's done his MD in community health.
Okay.
He's in charge of the entire district.
Okay.
So I used to send it to them. Then by afternoon they would phone up and say, yes, sir, I think it is going this way.
Right.
What should we do next and all that. That is actually the reason which made us look at rural health centers, rural hospitals of the government, to start saying that, okay, let's not fill up this place too much, because if we have another surge and we have too many skis, then we may not be able to provide room for them at the last minute.
Okay.
So that's why we actually activated the rural centers that we had.
Fine. For your asymptomatic and mild cases, correct?
Asymptomatic and mildly symptomatic patients, even if we admit them for 2-3 days here, remaining 7 days they can go there.
Okay, got it. So therefore, I'm glad to hear that you all took those predictions and the forecasting seriously, and I think it did help you all, because I think from all I've there have been other centers also we've been monitoring, or other districts we've been monitoring, but I think the response and the way that you all stepped up to the plate at the correct time is probably the best in Jalna. And congratulations for that. I would like to really commend you all for the way you all have handled the entire, right from when you all started, getting your 120-bed hospital, to making sure your oxygen supply, to making sure that you all ramp up in the correct time. And we are very glad that you all have taken the forecasting and our predictions, so that at least you all did take action at the right time. And I think you have never, in fact, from my memory of the data that you used to send me on a regular basis, I have to thank you for that, Dr. Moses. because that actually helped in keeping our predictions, in a more up-to-date fashion when the wave was
Right.
growing and so on. And the fact is that, because we had been able to get that sort of data from you on a regular basis, we were able to give you a more sort of, I guess we could say, accurate prediction. And you have really ramped up and done it well. Now, my question to you is, what would you advise, other sort of rural and underserved hospitals, especially, in the areas that we know, where they are going to be a little difficult with the facilities that they have. I refer to places like, Bihar, Jharkhand, and, Ganges belt altogether, where we know, that first and foremost, that entire story of the migration, I think all of us were kind of touched by it, by the way that they had to struggle to get back home. And now we know that they've got back home. They may not have got sick, but unfortunately, they probably carry the virus back to them, and probably transmitting it to their parents and elderly in those areas. So, what would your advice be to those hospitals there who we know are going to face the onslaught probably in a week or 2 weeks from now?
See, I personally feel once your hospital is labeled as a COVID hospital or a COVID center, your income generating patients stop immediately.
Right.
Even some of my patients walk away from my OPD saying, in some other building, you have got a COVID positive patient sitting.
Right.
So their income is going to go down.
Okay.
The only way they can survive is to have a deal with the state government, without which it is not going to work.
And what
because the people who are coming there are the poor people who have no insurance, no Mediclaim, nothing.
Right.
Probably they don't even have an Aadhaar card.
Right.
So unless they take under some government scheme,
okay,
they are going to suffer a lot of loss.
Okay. So I think when you say government scheme,
see, PMJY also promises some money.
Right.
And I don't know, like Maharashtra state, there is MJP, Mahatma Jyotiba Phule Yojana, which also says something. Even state government has fixed the rates on those who also have Mediclaim.
Okay.
So Mediclaim companies will not pay more than that. Like, for example, they have said 4,000 rupees for general ward for mild and moderate patients, plus PPE, plus PPE.
Oh, plus PPE, okay.
So patient can pay for PPE in addition.
Okay.
So for example, my calculation for even if one bed is full in my 25 bed facility,
right,
I need 10 PPEs a day.
Oh, wow, 10 PPEs a day.
Yeah, because 4 nurses, 6-hour shifts.
Okay.
4. Then housekeeping and sweeper.
Right.
2 shifts. So 4 and 4, 8.
Okay.
2 doctors' rounds.
Okay.
That's it, 10.
I see.
And some consultant decides to come and see, suddenly you lose some more.
I see.
So if you have got, say, 15, 20 patients in the center, then your cost of PPE gets
divided
distributed.
Okay. So
distributed among them. Otherwise, if you have got 1 or 2 patients, it's horribly expensive.
Got it. Fine. And therefore, it is better probably than to have at least 10 or more, especially that on something like Ayushman Bharat or PMJ sort of scheme, right?
Yes.
May I ask if the PMJ covers enough in case it is an ICU requirement without ventilator, say? Is there any payment that is done?
I think they have put up something as 9,000 rupees or something like that.
Oh, I see.
Which will not cover your ventilator cost.
No, but supposing you don't have ventilator, but other ICU.
Then, for ward side, it covers. Other ICU, again, they have specified certain tests are not covered, certain antibiotics are not covered, certain antibiotics are covered.
Okay.
So higher end antibiotics, if the patient has to buy, then it is okay. Otherwise, it's difficult. Newer drugs, like Remdesivir and all those things, if they have to buy, then that's a different issue. But nobody is going to give it to you.
Okay. Right. I think I've asked all the questions, Dr. Moses, and thank you so much for this time. I don't want to spend any more, I keep you from your busy schedule, but thank you so much. It was a wonderful, from our side in DH India and myself, this was a wonderful
Right.
case study that we did in Jalna district, and quite a big part of that was because you were so regular in passing over your data, and also taking our forecasting and our graphs seriously, because I think that has kept you all also very well
We
prepared.
have been able to plan ahead.
Exactly, and you'll have
Yeah.
executed it beautifully. And I hope
Yeah.
that that your model case actually is something that is also we can help other sort of districts, especially in those areas of need and underserved areas, study your case and then be able to accordingly follow the good things that you all have done. Again, congratulations and thank you for your
Okay.
time. And may you have a good day, and wishing you all the best to you and your staff. Please wish them on our behalf.
Right.
Right.
Thank you,
Thanks a
VD.
lot, Dr.
Bye.
Jain.